Well, the ANC is set to oppose an application lodged by its suspended Secretary-General, Ace Magashule, to have, amongst others, his suspension lifted. Last week, Friday, Magashule went on the offensive by serving Luthuli House with court papers challenging the constitutionality of the party's step-aside resolution that resulted in his suspension. The party has since sourced the services of some of the country's top legal minds to oppose Magashule's application. Meanwhile, a defiant Magashule yesterday addressed party members following the beginning of the corruption trial of former President Jacob Zuma, despite one of the suspension conditions being that he should not do so. ANC National Spokesperson Pule Mabe joins us. Pule, thanks for your time. Good to have you on the show.
Morning, Leanne, and morning to your viewers.
For a united party that ventilates issues internally, is your appointing of a legal team to oppose the SG's appeal an admission that the party is in crisis and the differences at this point are irreconcilable?
Well, the party is certainly not in crisis. Unfortunately, the constitution of the ANC is being taken on trial. And that constitution of the ANC is what effectively brings us together. In the constitution of the ANC, you found the oath of membership that we take when we join this voluntary enterprise, which effectively subjects us to the rules, the discipline, and the decorum of the African National Congress. Now, that very constitution is now being put to the test. It is important and only prudent that the African National Congress brings on board proper, sound individuals who understand the legalities, the constitution of the African National Congress, the constitution of the Republic, to be able to defend the party in that way. The party has already issued a statement stating that it will be opposing the application by the Secretary General to have his suspension lifted. As we do so, we will also be affirming and asserting the principles as set out in the constitution of the African National Congress to show that there is in no way that the rules set out in the constitution of the ANC are effectively in such a manner that they undermine or take away personal liberties of individuals. 25.70, which effectively empowers the National Executive Committee to mete out a temporary suspension. That clause is not even appealable. There are conditionalities attached to how we were executing that one. For instance, when an individual is indicted in a court to appear in a court of law, such an individual who does not elect to voluntarily step aside shall then be temporarily suspended in terms of Rule 25.70. But there are conditions attached to that kind of a temporary suspension. For instance, once a month, they will be expected to report to the relevant secretariat. If it is at a national level, they will report to the SGO. Every 6 months, there shall be review with an understanding that we've all established that sometimes cases that are being ventilated out in a court of law tend to take longer than expected. So we do not want to disenfranchise our own cadres from participating in the full life of the organization because their cases are before the courts.
Okay.
Our expectation has always been that before any of our comrades, regardless of the position they hold in the organization, approaches the courts, they shall have exhausted internal processes of organization. For instance, the constitution of the ANC clearly spells out how an appeal in the organization shall be lodged, so that so that in the final analysis, everyone could then say, I was treated fairly by the organization. But when courts are then approached in the manner that they've been approached, the ANC ought to act to protect and defend its own constitution and to also protect and defend its own decisions. The ANC leadership must remain loyal to the decisions it takes at all times. And it must show the people of South Africa that when we take decisions, we shall have applied our mind. We shall have consulted. You would remember, Leanne, we did not arrive on executing the decision to step aside hastily. We did so carefully. There was consultation, and every time we came out to take the people of South Africa and our own members on board in terms of the process that we are undertaking to be able to implement this. We even went further through a process that was led by our Treasurer General, Comrade Pule Mabe, to make sure that there are even conditionalities attached to the step-aside guidelines, so that there is fairness in the overall. We have even had a 30-day period to allow for those that are impacted upon by that decision to voluntarily step aside. And we said, if at the end of the 30-day period they did not opt to step aside voluntarily, then 25.70 shall kick in. This was not designed for the Secretary General. These are matters of principle discussed in organization and agreed by the entirety of the leadership of the African National Congress.
All right, fair enough. Let's quickly ask you one or two questions. We are in time trouble here. What process unfolds now? Does the party still consider Magashule suspended despite this looming court action?
Correct. The decision of the party still holds. Remember, the SG going to court does not necessarily take away the right of the African National Congress to make its own decisions, unless the court rules otherwise. But from where we stand, the decision to have this SG temporarily suspended stands. That's the decision of the National Executive Committee. There's not been any other body that would have decided otherwise. Conditions that the National Executive Committee had agreed upon, those conditions still stand. The SG in his court papers is also taking our own decision on him having to apologize for the suspension letter he shall have written to the president. He has also taken that matter to court.
To court as well.
It is his own right. We can't stop anyone from approaching the court. The ANC will also have to go and defend its own decisions in the manner that it is doing now.
So, Pule, yesterday, what happened outside of the Pietermaritzburg High Court, this again was another a violation of his temporary suspension orders. So, addressing crowds outside of the court, is there repercussion for this?
Of course, the National Executive Committee is watching these developments closely. Like I've said, Leanne, he has taken the matter of that apology, including the step aside and everything else that we shall have pronounced to court. So we have already appointed a legal team that we announced yesterday. We will be dealing with these matters that are before the courts.
Yeah.
When we meet again, either in the National Working Committee or in the National Executive Committee, we shall be able to reflect on the developments, especially what we saw yesterday, including the conduct of some of our own National Executive Committee members who decide to go against decisions of the National Executive Committee, decisions that are taken in meetings that are present. I mean, if you are in a meeting of the National Executive Committee and a decision is taken, even if you do not like that decision, you don't break ranks and speak against decisions of the collective. That's still discipline. If you have got to use structures of organization to be able to ventilate and express your own views. Those that are old and have had the opportunity to lead the organization longer than some of us carry the responsibility to teach younger generations the essence of discipline. You see, the unity of the ANC only gets to be propelled forward through a disciplined cadreship that is loyal to decisions of the collective, that does everything else to demonstrate that we all want to contribute to the renewal of the African National Congress. So some of the things that we saw outside there, when the National Executive Committee meet or when the National Working Committee meet, especially where it involves members of the NEC, will have to reflect on this and then effectively say, is this the kind of a conduct that is befitting of the ANC cadreship that must be able to drive forward the unity trajectory that the people of South Africa need to be understanding as to be standing behind.
All right, so Pule, will
we are not loyal to our own decisions, we are going to confuse our people.
Indeed, but are you going to have, are any of those that gathered outside the court yesterday, firstly, was there, did you give some of these members permission to go out there? I mean, utterances by the likes of Tony Ngeni, also seeing KZN Premier Sihle Kelale there. I mean, talk to us about this. Will the party be acting against them in any way, or was this not a problem?
Well, the Provincial Executive Committee of KwaZulu-Natal had already discussed their need to support former President Jacob Zuma. And there's always been consensus. I mean, since 2018, they've always been there and all of that. So these are matters that were properly processed in the organization. Those cadres didn't just go there, they processed that. What becomes unfortunate is when statements that go against decisions of the National Executive Committee are uttered outside the courts and uttered so by members of the National Executive Committee. Now, that is a matter that the NEC ought to really attend to, because if we do not do so, and if we are not loyal to our own decisions, then we're going to self-liquidate ourselves. We have got to make sure that through our own actions, we hold on to the unity of the African National Congress. And anyone who goes against that unity ought to then be called in so that we try and understand where these cadres are coming from. We can't be going out there shouting slogans that seek to liquidate the leadership of the African National Congress. We can't do that. All of us have got the responsibility, even in the most difficult of times, to hold on to the unity and renewal of the African National Congress. This is sacrosanct. It's an essence that has taken the ANC to where it is today.
Indeed.
And all of us must guard that jealously.
Pule, before I let you go, just big statements made, and not by one individual, but many that attended yesterday, basically saying that the case both against the suspended Secretary General and against former President Jacob Zuma, this is a political case against them, not a law case against them. That's the standing of a lot of these ANC and NEC members. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I'm not at liberty to talk about the nature of cases, whether they are legal or political. Once a case is before the court of law, courts only deal with legal matters. Political parties deal with political issues. So I'm not a competent individual to really enter that space. I belong to a political party, and where there are political issues in the organization, we use political processes and platforms to be able to resolve those. That's why we have also said, even to our own Secretary General, that there are sufficient platforms that exist in organization to be able to address whatever concerns that could be there, including appealing whatever decision that he may feel that needs to be appealed. The ANC has always operated like that. We ourselves have been encouraging our members to use and exhaust internal processes of organization.
Okay.
So that at the end of it all, it is members of the African National Congress that contribute towards the strengthening of their own organization, which is the voluntary enterprise that they joined, whose oath they took, and agreed to subject themselves to the rules of that kind of an organization.
All right, Pule, we leave it there for this morning. Thanks very much for talking to us here on the program. That's ANC National Spokesperson Pule Mabe. Let's take a quick break. We'll have news headlines, sports as well. Stay with us.